welcome everyone. We will get started here. Good morning. Now, as I mentioned, hi. If you are having problems seeing your screen, hopefully everyone can see that should say PaCT Coaches Prep August 2nd, 2018. Oh, Randy, thank you. Okay, so it pops up.
You're welcome.
That's why. All right. So I don't think I'll be able to answer anyone because I still can't find anything. I think maybe because I'm sharing my screen. But I will see your messages pop up briefly and then they disappear. So Jennifer, are you able to see the chat box?
I am.
Okay, you are in charge. I can't. I'm blind to any chatting, so I'll be relying on you to fill me in on what's happening in the chat box.
Yeah, I think it could work. I just want to check. So, Randy, you just sent a message. Did you send that to all participants or just to Michelle?
Just to Michelle. I was trying to get it to work for her without letting everyone else know, but I guess we're discussing it so everyone else knows.
You know what? We're all friends here.
Well, I know that you were helping to test, so but I wanted to check that because I didn't see it, so I wanted to make sure it was working for me. So if somebody even wants to put in a test in the chat box, we'll make sure that it's all working and we'll be good to go.
It's Charlotte. I put good morning, and I put it under all, but I don't think you guys have seen it.
Oh, I didn't see that.
No.
I just saw the message from Randy. You sent just a test for me, so I see that.
Okay, you know what? I think maybe what we should do, we're going to go old school. And, I see Randy says, good morning, everyone. Did everyone see that?
Bonnie, I don't know. I only have
just
message host presenter. I don't have the ability to message everybody.
Everybody, okay.
If you click Q&A, and then it'll come up with, it'll say all panelists.
Okay. Well, in the interest of time, let's go old school, and why don't we try, actually, if you have something important to say, we'll actually speak using our words, and there's points where we have discussion time, and so we'll just try to come off mute and discuss, and because I'm not sure that everybody is able to use the chat box right now. So if you've heard quite a few beeps, so welcome everyone. I'm actually surprised at the number of beeps I've heard. I was anticipating that we'd have a very small group with vacation time, but actually it sounds like there's quite a few people on. So that's fantastic. Welcome, and at some point in a couple slides here, we'll get everyone to reveal their identity. And so just be prepared to come off mute. And now there we go. So in case you've forgotten, we assume that WebEx has not changed so much that the chatting hopefully looks somewhat like this. I can't see it, so if you can see an all participants option for chatting, go ahead and give it a shot, but I think we'll rely on using our voices today on this particular call. On the phone, though, that hasn't changed. It's still *6 to mute and then *6 again to unmute, although, as always, we recommend if you've got a muting function on your phone itself, that's usually the better bet because it's a little quicker to come off and on mute. All right. So I know I've heard we've got Laura, we've got Monica, Charlotte. Who else do we have who's joined who is a coach?
Mia's here.
Good morning, Mia. Don't be shy. There were lots of beeps there. I know there were more coaches. I can't see anything popping up in the chatting. Any other coaches? Jennifer, are you seeing anything in the chat box?
No, I don't see anything in the chat box.
Okay. All right.
Lacey
well,
here from LifeMed.
Oh, yay. Okay. Hi, Lacey.
Hi.
Anyone else? In the coaches. If not, we'll maybe hear from you when we get to discussion points along the way. All right. And I know we've got Mia is, I think, the only IA who's on the call today.
Who's here too?
Oh, so you are there. Oh, great.
I am here, yeah.
Nadia from Mosaic.
Oh, good morning, Nadia.
Good morning.
Okay. All right. Well, moving on. So the tools have been loaded for TestBox 4. They're up on the top website in the usual spot, and you'll see the guide for coaches is there, and the TestBox 4 materials are there. We wanted to send them out to you much earlier, but we got them into the meeting invite yesterday. So they are there, but it's probably just as easy to go to the website and download them from there if you haven't already. And all the tools that we'll be talking about today are also either on the website or they're embedded in the actual TestBox materials itself. So that's the same as usual. And I just wanted to start quickly by reviewing. We did a little survey, if you recall, a little while ago, and I just wanted to quickly review the results of that. We had 7 of our coaches respond and a couple IAs, but I wanted to mainly cover what the coaches said. So in the first question, it was my personal opinion of the current PaCT TestBox delivery strategy is best reflected by the following statement. And we got kind of a roughly almost half said everything was great, don't change a thing, or be open to more support with TestBox introductions, but fine either way. So it doesn't look like there's any urgent need to change the TestBox delivery, so that's good. But then in the final question, we asked for a little bit more information. So this one was more about things that we're currently doing, our current process, and then maybe some potential new things we could try out. Again, it was pretty clear here that people are fairly happy with the current process, having our webinars. But the other area that might be of interest is to have regular touch points with your IAs. And that would be a potential new practice. But then when I looked at the comments, there was another, I just tried to kind of theme them. And the themes were essentially that the time with the IAs is very valued. So there's that support is something that is considered a good thing. More time on TestBox stuff might be challenging, and we understand that both from the perspective of our IAs, and we are down a few IAs, so those that we have are managing an awful lot right now. So to add more might be challenging for them. And also I know a lot of our coaches are very busy, so adding more might be difficult for them too. There was, though, support for that one-to-one time with the IA. So what I might recommend is we go on an individual basis. So if you're a coach and you're feeling like you would benefit from a little more structured one-on-one time with your IA, I recommend you contact your IA and just see what you can work out together, and maybe you can find a time to meet after TestBox delivery through the webinar if you're having some struggle with that, or if you want to have a regular check-in. You can discuss that. And I know many of you are having no problem at all, and really it's not something that you're really needing, so we'll just leave it up to you on an individual basis and see how that goes. And again, it's all PDSing, right? This is all trying out different ways of doing this. So we'd love to hear if the approach that you try out has great benefit. That would be fantastic. So are there any comments on the results of the survey or anything else? This is our kind of open discussion time. If there's anything burning that you'd like to bring to PaCT Central. Anyone surprised by those results or concerned about the option of on an individual basis with your session with your IA? All right. Well, by your silence, I will assume that sounds good and everyone's in agreement. So we'll carry on with the material for test box 4. So this time we're taking access and continuity a little bit further. We've addressed it in a couple of the previous test boxes and we're carrying on with it. We have reframing social history, talking about the care plan template and using that in the areas of social history and also talking about goal setting. So we're getting a little deeper into the care planning process with the patient. And then, as always, we have a section on standardizing data entry for team-based care. That's our EMR section for today in test box, where we're taking that again into another area compared to the last test boxes. So to start us off, the area in the test box on access and continuity is where we'll begin. And we know that in order to have good continuity with their physician and clinic team, patients need to be able to access appointments when they need them. That's kind of the heart of it all. If they can't get in, then all the clinical care in the world doesn't matter. So in test box 4, we dive deeper into the concept of access, and we provide some samplings of strategies that teams can PDSA to work on and see if they can maybe move their access a little bit. And it's interesting, the small changes that can often result in big improvements when it comes to access. So if you've gone through the materials at all, you'll notice one of the things that's in there is called the Balanced Panel Calculator. And so what you might find if their team has not really thought too much about their access, and in particular looking at their supply and demand, this is a really quick and easy tool that they might want to use. And it's very rudimentary, so this is not a fancy or slick or sophisticated tool by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a very quick and easy way to get a sense of where the panel supply and demand is at. And so the theory is that good access happens when there are enough appointments available to meet the needs of a particular panel. And if there's an imbalance, access will be impacted, of course, and patients will either have to wait to see their own provider or team, or they'll go somewhere else to be seen when they need to be seen sooner. So that doesn't support continuity of care. So we know that continuity and access are really, really closely linked. So this panel calculator is quite simple, but it's not necessarily intuitive. So we made sure to add in the materials, there's a box that defines what all of these measurements are and what you might be asking the team to think about. And it is from the perspective of the physician in particular. So how many weeks per year they would be working if they're the ones seeing the patients primarily. One thing to point out, one of the things it asks for is the revisit rate, and that's not something that teams typically know off the top of their heads. So if they have done the HQCA panel report, ask them to go to page 42. There's a couple places where it looks like they're getting this data, but the one that's most accurate is on page 42, and it's that raw data for the average visits per patient. And that would be the number from the most current year, 2016-17, that you would want to plug into that equation. If the physician has not requested or hasn't received their HQCA report yet, the number that's kind of considered sort of standard that will cover you is 3. So just plug 3 into that equation, and you should be okay. So we also included an example in the test box if the team is kind of having a bit of a struggle understanding what you're getting at. There's an example of the numbers that have been plugged into the calculator, and then the results. So you can see in the results in the example that it looks like this physician is what we call over-paneled by approximately 400 patients. And so over-paneling means there's more demand for the appointment slots than likely are available to the patients, which could result in some challenges. So one thing we did want to make sure that you are aware of, and it's in your coach's guide, sometimes when the result is that the physician is quote-unquote over-paneled, they think that maybe they're being asked to fire patients, to, get rid of patients to get that number down, and that is absolutely not ever an option that we would promote. What is an option, however, is to close the panel. So close the gates, close the door on the panel. So perhaps have a policy for that particular physician that we're not taking on new patients right now. And then through attrition, usually that number will start to come down. And eventually, if you're continuing to monitor the panel size, you will get closer to that ideal or optimal panel size. And once you're there, then you can start opening and closing the door to keep that balance in place. So again, just be aware of that. That is something that we want to make sure if a physician is getting that impression that they're being asked to fire patients, absolutely not something that we would ever ask. I actually had a slide in here that had Donald Trump, but it was a meme, and then I took it out because I thought maybe it's a little too early in the morning for Donald Trump. But we will not be firing patients, is the bottom line. So then we get into, in the materials, there's a whole section on strategies to balance supply and demand, and they're pretty straightforward. They're in 4 sections. There's tips for managing the schedule, tips for managing visits, there's some tips on using the power of the team, and then some alternatives to actual face-to-face visits. And so that some of it's a little more advanced, but it's actually happening in Alberta. There are family physicians who are seeing patients or caring for patients, not necessarily face-to-face. So there's some information in there, including billing codes that your teams might be interested in. And they're pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but a couple of things. In the scheduling basics section, we do have what is called the hierarchy of scheduling. And so you might see this hierarchy out there in other places. And one thing we just wanted you to know is it might say, book to patient's own doctor today, then book to patient's own doctor in the future if the concern is urgent, book today but not with their own doctor, book in the future, or with own doctor, book today but not with own doctor, or book in the future not with own doctor. So the idea is we're trying to keep the patient as much as possible in continuity with their physician, and if they can't see their own physician, then in continuity with their with the information about them. So at least staying in the clinic where the EMR and all of their information is. But your teams are a little more advanced, and we know that there's a lot more teamwork going on. So we wanted to add book to your own doctor or most appropriate team member. So that also counts in the continuity if the patient is able to see a member of the team. So we just wanted to make sure if they see something different out there, it's because we know that these teams are probably doing a little more team-based care, and so we wanted this to reflect that. All of these tools are available on the website, as I mentioned, and in particular the panel calculator, there's a link to it within the materials, but we also have it living separately on the website, so you can click on that to bring it up as well. Are there any questions about any of those materials or comments? I should also add there's a couple of tools that are interesting that you might want to use. Embedded in the test box, there's a little podcast on access and continuity. So if they wanted to hear more in a more of kind of casual conversation of kind of an expert on access being interviewed, that's on there. And then there's also, it's called a scheduling simulation activity, and for anyone who is doing the booking in particular, it's kind of like almost like a little game. You might want to go through it yourself and then decide maybe you want to do it as an activity with the team and just see if they can figure out what the right answer is. It actually is quite tricky to do your scheduling to maximize your consideration around access and continuity when scheduling. So give that a try and see what you think. And Sue, you were involved in the development of this one. Did you have anything to add?
No, I don't think I have anything to add other than just explore all those tools because they're really great. And again, thinking about some of your team members who are doing scheduling, who are sitting at the front desk, I think it might be really helpful. So thanks so much.
Yeah. Yeah, great idea. And just so you know, we're giving you the tip of the iceberg. There's an awful lot that people can do to address improving their access and continuity. And there aren't really big things. It's a culmination of small corrections and inefficiencies and little things that you add, but together they result in big changes in access. So just remind your teams that it may not seem like they're doing anything really huge, but they'd be surprised at the impact it actually has on your TNA when you take on a few of these activities. All right, I'll open it up for any last comments or discussion. Looking for 8. Forward. So reframing social history.
That's me.
Right, Jennifer.
So great.
I'll change the slides for you.
Thanks. So you can move to the next slide. Thanks, Michelle. So for this section, we're focusing on the social history section of the care plan template. So to create a collaborative care plan, it's helpful to know, to get to know your patient, what's going on for them, and the world around them. Things like social factors like being able to afford medication, access transportation, and manage some of the competing priorities like having aging parents or kids can significantly impact somebody's ability to manage their condition. And certainly knowing some of these social issues that are challenging patients can really help when it comes to the goal setting and action planning section and ensuring that the goals and actions that are relevant, realistic, and meaningful. The next slide. So what we hear from providers is that with this section, there's some discomfort with having these conversations. For one, it can be uncomfortable to hear about some of the challenges your patients are having. At times, providers have said that they're not sure that their patients are comfortable sharing that information, that sometimes the appointments can start to get off track with those conversations, and so they're reluctant to really, go in too deep with some of those conversations. And then, issues come up that providers maybe feel that they aren't equipped to address, and feel conscious about that, and wanting to help, and therefore are reluctant to maybe engage in some of those conversations. So that's some of what we've heard and read in the literature. So in knowing that, we really frame this section around what can we offer that could make or help providers navigate that section in a more efficient and effective way that addresses some of these issues that they've identified. Next slide. So one of the tools is the care plan template, the PaCT care plan template. And you guys are familiar with that. The teams are familiar. Time is spent to add in some sample scripting, some prompting questions to really support providers to navigate that section. So that's one tool that can be used. And then next slide. In addition to that, within the test boxes, we felt that in order to do some of the activities we wanted them to do over the 6 weeks, so some of the ideas to test, for example, there needed to be a bit of background information about some key concepts. So a couple of resources were developed, and you'll see those linked within the test box document. One is a video, so that's the one on the left, Effective Care Planning, Addressing the Sticking Points. That one sets a scene around social history, and then starts to bring in some content from test box 2 and even test box 1 with Set the Scene, and then some of the practice principles that were talked about in test box 2. So you'll see that link, and in particular zoning in on the practice principles: client-centered, client choice, client control, first ask then offer, wait till 8, and call it as you see it with TACT. So really how they can use those practice principles to help, again, navigate and help with the flow of the conversation, and keep it focused, so that that time issue that is quite pressing for providers is kind of considered. And then the other thing in the video, as well as in a separate one-pager that you'll see on the screen on the right, is one on barriers. So what we do with these resources is start to introduce the teams to an acronym, and you'll see it on the screen. BEST is the acronym, and that stands for behaviors, emotions, situations, and thinking. And that can be used by providers to classify barriers. And then when barriers are classified, you can start to, it helps you to understand how you might go about addressing some of those barriers by reframing thinking or problem solving, or using different techniques. So classifying those barriers can be really helpful. And at the bottom section of that one-page resources, there's some sample phrasing that helps providers understand how they might go about addressing a barrier by turning that barrier into a facilitator. So you can see some samples on that one-page document. And certainly healthcare providers play a really important role in identifying barriers. Sometimes patients don't even recognize that those things are barriers, so it can be helpful to identify those for the patient and for them to reflect on those, to be able to move forward and really think about how they might go about managing that barrier. A couple other supports that are mentioned in the actual test box document is a couple of services that patients can access. So something that providers can offer as a service. And we did include 2 services that are provincial. That's Alberta Supports and Better Choices, Better Health. Now we recognize that there's other services likely available in the different areas, and team members might be aware of those. So it'd be good to have a discussion to see what services team members know of, and so that the rest of the team is familiar with those. Another option, if teams aren't sure what's available, is to talk to your PCN about what's available in the area, and recruit some help to kind of start to build that common understanding of what's available. And then we also wanted to bring to your attention some work that's being done. So there's some work done provincially around primary care and social determinants, and in particular, a grant opportunity that's come up, and Cindy's actually going to talk about it in a couple of slides. So I'm going to leave it at that and then let Cindy talk about it in a minute. Next slide. So I thought I'd just end off this section with a few tips for you guys as you guys work with your teams if they select this section as one that they'd like to work on. So first of all, start by just checking in with your team members to see how they're feeling about navigating that social history section. Who's more comfortable, who's less comfortable. That can help to identify who might be good mentors to draw on. One learning approach that is common in medicine is the see one, do one, teach one, and that can be a good fit for this work as well. So when those mentors are identified, they can then new staff members or people that are developing their skills can watch or observe them have a conversation with the patient about social history. Then they can actually perform and do one themselves with the patient. And then the next step to kind of reinforce learning is to teach how to navigate that section to another colleague. So that might be one learning approach that you could recommend. I mentioned that we do link back to some of previous test box content, and I think it's really valuable if you're able to highlight some of those links just to show that you're reinforcing some of the learning in previous test boxes, and also make it less overwhelming because they see that it's not necessarily new information, but they're applying it in a different way. I already mentioned about connecting with the PCN about resources. And then the last one I'd recommend is one of the things that you can do, I mentioned the best barriers and classifying those. So if you're in a huddle with your team and you're talking about either a client case or something going on for them and you sense that there's some barriers coming up, take a pause there and cue them to think about how they would classify, like that you're identifying a barrier there and how might they classify that barrier. And then that's a good way to kind of initiate practicing and, again, generating that common understanding of what it means to classify barriers and reinforcing that learning. So next slide, this is just showing where the resources are available. So the video is linked right within the test box document, and then that one document on barriers to action is also a link directly to that resources on that page. And I think this is where Cindy's slide comes in, and I'll pass it over to her, and then we'll pause for questions.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. As Jennifer mentioned, there was a call for expression of interest that went out just last week on the reducing the impacts of financial strain on Albertans grant opportunity. And because we know that income is one of the most powerful determinants of health, but as Jennifer mentioned, it can be also one of the most challenging ones to address for primary care teams and for communities as well. This grant has been awarded to work with 2 PCNs on supporting primary care screening for and responding to financial concerns among patients, strengthening linkages to some of those community services, and building some community capacity to address gaps. And so what you see on the screen was part of the invitation for the call for expression that went out last week, and that invitation went out to PCN executive directors, to primary care zone leaders, and to population and public health zone leaders. PaCT Innovation Hub PCNs are being given the first opportunity to express interest for this grant opportunity. And so if this is something that you think you're interested in, then feel free to contact your PCN. As I said, the executive directors have this call for expression of interest, or if you're looking for more details on what the opportunity entails, then feel free to shoot me an email, and my email's at the bottom of the screen there on the slide.
I'll just mention, it's hard to see the email, at least on my view, at the bottom of the screen there, so I wonder if, I don't know, maybe I'll try posting it to all participants as well, just to make sure that people?
Sure, and it's cindy.grand@ahs.ca. So Cindy is just CINDY.GRAND@ahs.ca.
So I posted in the chat box, and those that are able to see it can access it there. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Cindy and Jennifer. And I believe now,
can I ask a question? Sorry, this is Lisa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So, yes, hi, sorry. I've heard about the grant. I think it's very exciting, and I know the question is, are you interested in partnering? And I think what we get back as questions is sort of, well, what's that going to entail? I've heard there's a screening tool, and I'm not sure if there's supports that are planned to help facilitate that coordination and integration, because that's often where we fall short, where there's a lack of resources to sort of help get traction and continue momentum with pulling those, community resources, healthcare partners together. So is there a way to find out a little bit more about what this grant might provide and for somebody to say yes to it, to really have a better notion of a day in the life of what they're saying yes to? Is that fair?
Yeah, it absolutely is, Lisa, yeah, and that's a great question. And one of the really unique things about this grant opportunity is the partnership with population and public health. So really bringing that community side in, and we have a good understanding, and we've heard loud and clear that we can't ask these questions and screen for these things if we don't have something in place already to send somebody who screens positive to a question on income to, right? And people need to feel really comfortable that they'll have something to help facilitate changing those barriers into facilitators in place already before the screening would be in place. And so there's a good understanding of all the partners that piece has to happen first.
Okay, and all right, okay, well, I mean, that makes sense. Like, I know they say we open up a can of worms and then you don't know where to put the worms, right? But also just building that foundation for having the partners ready for action in the first place, and understanding the role clarity around that. And so I just wondered if there was facilitation involved in all of that first. So I'm hearing yes. Yeah, okay, yeah,
for sure. And we have some funding that's sort of earmarked for community innovation type liaisons who would start to do that facilitation and make those linkages in a temporary type position, but then start to build those relationships in a more sustainable way so that processes and relationships are in place by the end of the grant period.
Very good. We're in the process of doing some grant funding apps for that, so maybe they'll beat us to it. That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Jennifer and Cindy? Great. And Jennifer, I think you're still
I'm still on.
Next section.
And this is a really short section, and the focus of this section is really on building a common understanding of the key aspects of goal setting. You can move on to the next slide. So we know that physicians and other providers learn about goal setting early in their training. It's a big part of their, practice right from the start, and a common practice to do collaborative goal setting with patients. However, what we do recognize and have found, again, in the literature and based on kind of what we've noticed in practice, is that key aspects at times can be missed. And in particular, it's that practice of really bringing it back to what's important to the patient, making it meaningful and relevant, taking into account some of the barriers that patients are experiencing, and really supporting also their overall understanding of their condition and how they can go about managing their health over time. So this section, so if you want to move on to the next one, so there's a component in the test box with some activities and things to test for the providers and team. And we also created this resource, the separate resource, that there is a link to this resource within the test box on the 4 aspects of goal setting. And so we know that a lot of teams have started to make changes to their goal setting and action planning sections of their template, whether or not they started with the PaCT template and started to make changes there, or with their clinic template and are making changes to that goal setting section. And so what we wanted to do within this text box is get teams thinking about these 4 aspects and whether or not what they have currently in their templates includes all 4 aspects of these of goal setting that is noted on here. So yeah, so this resource just provides a bit of an explanation of each of those aspects and then some of the activities stimulating some of that reflection. And again, the focus is more on just building that common understanding and then possibly trigger some potential adjustments to their template if appropriate to reflect these aspects. And then just want to mention that in Test Box 5, we'll be building off of this information with some additional resources and tools around effective goal setting, action planning, and then follow-up care. So just wanted to make you aware that that's what we'll be coming after. And I think that's all I have for this section, and so we can open it. Oh, thank you. I forgot about this slide. So again, that one resource is linked separately on the web page and also linked within the test box document. So open it up to questions about that section. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. All right. Next up is our EMR section on standardizing data entry for team-based care. And Lori, are you available to tell us about the...
I'm here.
All right.
I was trying to chat, but like you, I couldn't. I could only chat to a limited number of people. So.
Okay. All right.
All right. So ready to rock and roll. Next slide, please. So we've been talking and talking and talking in all of the test boxes about some elements of EMR standardization. And so this test box is no different. We're continuing to look at the places in the EMR that really focus on enhancing team-based care, that the team always knows exactly where to go to for a certain piece of information. And a lot of these data fields that we're talking about that enhance that team-based care are also fields that are found in the current care planning template. So building on what we've done so far, we're going to talk about prescriptions, allergies, and modifiable lifestyle and risk factors in this test box. So specifically with prescriptions, this is really about using the prescriber module in the EMR as outlined by the vendor. And a lot of the vendors, or all of the vendors actually, are making enhancements and tweaks to their prescriber to make it a little bit more user-friendly. Some of you may have heard, and if not, this might be music to your ears, is that there is going to be e-prescribing. So what we have coming in the near future, it's in pilot in a few provinces across Canada, including here in Alberta, is something that's going to be attached to the EMRs that's going to allow physicians to send a prescription directly to a pharmacy or directly to a cloud where a pharmacy will pull it down. So patients will no longer have a written prescription that they're bringing to a pharmacy. And so the modules they're getting, or the prescriber modules in the EMRs are being enhanced to allow for this functionality. So I guess that's one piece, but we know in the future that we're going to have to transition all prescribers onto using their prescribing module, because in the future it won't be optional that prescriptions are written. They're going to be submitted electronically. So there's no, I guess what the work that we're doing here is really going to help us to get ready for that piece, but it helps us prepare for the team-based care. And so we didn't write up any specific instructions on using the prescriber, in the tip sheets, but we did write some additional information into EMR-specific tip sheets for this section. But it takes you to the help files that shows you the basics of how a prescription, how a prescriber is used in the EMR. And so that's the first piece that we're hoping to focus teams in on. And we know that there's a lot of variability in how the prescribers are being used, or to the extent that they are being used. Some of them are maximized fully by physicians, and others are still writing out prescriptions manually, even though they have an EMR. So most of you will probably be okay, because we know the majority of physicians are using their prescriber. But if not, there's going to be a little bit of change that you're going to need to help your teams with. The second piece is on allergies and recording allergies in the EMR. And this is similar to prescriptions in that the EMRs have a specific module for recording allergies. But what we know is this is actually less used. The prescribers are well used, and there's been a lot of modifications and enhancements made by the vendors. But allergies, I think, might fall a little bit lower on the totem pole with the number of requests they get. So we know that there's a lot of variability. So we've suggested that the allergy modules in the EMRs, again, are used as per the vendor instructions, and we put links in the EMR-specific tip sheets to where that information can be found. But really, at the end of the day, it's about getting it in a standardized place. If the team and the physician really don't like how the allergy module operates, they can, as long as they agree on a standardized place to find this information, that will suffice for enhancing your team-based care. And then the last piece is the modifiable lifestyle and risk factors. Many of you will be familiar with this work because so many of these are found in the ASAP maneuvers menu. So around tobacco and exercise, and if you're doing it really early on, alcohol was included in there as well. So there is information existing on several how to optimize the EMR with recording and then reporting on modifiable lifestyle and risk factors. And there's additional work going on through the ASAP Plus work that's ongoing. So it builds on the maneuvers that were selected in ASAP. And there's additional maneuvers, and alcohol is specific there. Fruits and vegetables, and Mia Kavanagh, I know you're on the line. Is there another one that I'm missing?
Yeah, so there's the 4 modifiable factors: tobacco, exercise, which are already on the menu. Alcohol, as you mentioned, fruits and vegetables is basically the brand new one, but also we sort of consider there's a bit of a 5th one, which we say was weight management, and weight management is the BMI measure. So yes. It's just kind of odd because we already do height and weight, but this is where we actually monitor BMI specifically and treat it as its own measure.
Okay, thanks, Mia. So just to let you know, all of that is already existing in the EMR tip sheets around the ASAP maneuvers, and slowly all of the ASAP Plus maneuvers are being built in as well. Of course, we know these aren't all of the modifiable risk factors, modifiable lifestyle, and risk factors that are out there. And of course, every EMR is a little bit different in how and where other pieces might be recorded, such as other drug use or gambling, etc. So there's lots of variation, but there's a really good start on starting to get some of the basics down. So a lot of your teams, if they participate in ASAP, will already be well ahead of the game on this piece. So I'll go to the next slide, please. So like the last time with the advanced care, advanced directives pieces, we're supplementing the EMR specific tip sheets with some content on these 3 areas. So this time they were on the website last time. This time they're actually embedded right into your test box, and the Wolf and MedAccess ones are complete. And the Cure and Health Quest, they're just a few days behind, so I think we'll probably have those ready for next week, and if not, the week after for sure. And we'll have those posted on the website. And I think next slide takes us to our questions. See if there's any questions about the content of this test box. All right.
Must be crystal clear. Thank you, Lori. Great. For one, I don't know if anyone else was doing like a silent, well, I wasn't so silent cheer about the e-prescribing. I think this is going to be a really exciting movement forward for us all. So.
Yeah. Oh, and thanks, Michelle. I'll comment as well in the EMR tip sheet. We did include a link if you want to read more, learn more about the e-prescribing. There's just a couple of 1 or 2 page documents there that outline what the project is, and others that actually tell you now a little bit about the pilots and what's going on with them. So just if you're interested in learning a little bit more or talking to your clinics about it, there is some really easy, there's some great information available, and the link is there for you.
Yeah, fantastic. And so kind of a bonus, the teams that have already done this work will be in great shape when the time comes for that to launch. So great. So any questions or comments for Lori? So what's next? Jennifer? Oh, actually, before we do that, I did want to give a shout out, because one of the things that's coming up, and Lacey, I hope it's okay that I put you on the spot here, but we just found out that Life Medical Clinic was accepted. They're going to actually be presenting at Accelerating Primary Care in November, and so this is really exciting. And if you're cool with it, Lacey, could you just give us like a brief synopsis of what you're presenting on there?
Sure, yeah, no, that's fine. We submitted our abstract based on the data collection and assessment with Alberta Health Services, where Dr. Joe worked with our 3 hives consulting to assess and see who was utilizing emergency resources the most in our community. And that we've used that information to help guide who we are inviting to our care planning processes. Just gives it a little bit, more data behind the resources that we're gleaning towards the PaCT process, so that we're making an impact in our community, hopefully. So that's what the abstract was around. Just what we found in our community specifically, who is utilizing, how we use that to choose our population, and how we use that within to select our invitations.
Oh, that's fantastic, and we're so proud of you. So well done, and we're really excited to see you guys present at APCC. So you'll have your whole PaCT family cheering for you in the crowd, which is great. So congratulations.
Great, thanks very much.
And Jennifer, did you want to talk about the dates ahead?
Yeah, sure, I could do that. I think you already mentioned that the test box materials are up, and people saw that with some of the screenshots, what was posted, and it being under the tools and resources section of the website. So we pass the baton off to you guys to take these test boxes out to your teams and start socializing and talking about some of the sections and the activities, and getting started on work to enhance your care planning practices. The next 2 webinars coming up are the test box for Share and Learn on September 20th, And just want to mention, since we did end up canceling the test box 3 share and learn, we're hoping that provides an opportunity for teams to not only share what happened over the last 6 weeks with test box 4, but also look at what was done with test box 3 items as well. So keep that in mind. And if anybody is willing to stand up and share, I know that there'll be a call out to see if any teams in particular want to share any items that they've been working on. And then we have test box 5 coming out at the end of September. So our PaCT Central group will be busy over the rest of the summer and into September putting that together to get out to you guys again on September 27th and hopefully posted prior to that date so that you guys can take a quick look before that webinar.
We recognize that. Yeah, I was going to say we recognize that there's a real variety in where the teams are at, and that's still okay. So when we're at a share and learn, if your team hasn't even finished their test box 3 materials or the work that they're doing with the materials yet, that's completely fine. We recognize the teams need to work at the pace that works for them, and so we really have considered, even though it is the test box for share and learn, really we're not limiting it to that test box material. It's more of a generic open share and learn where you're at, what you've learned so far. So don't worry if your team is like, oh, we haven't even done test box 4 yet, we don't have anything to share. Don't worry. It's not specific to that material. It's just more general. So there's no pressure on the teams that are maybe not quite up to the current test box. That's perfectly fine. All right. In our last 2 minutes here then, we just want to wish everyone a happy rest of your summer, and we'll be talking to you again in September. And again, your IAs, as always, are your link to PaCT Central, so if you have any questions or concern or need a little more information on something, please contact them, and we're always here for your support as well. So thanks, everyone, and we'll talk to you next time.